Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host, here in Chambersburg, PA, getting loaded. Finished up my home time, and actually this load's going to Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm going to close my windows because it's getting a little loud here. See how this works. And so go to Louisville, Kentucky, but I'm picking up Paul, who's been on home time, and I'm basically, he's gonna run with me for a day or two, and I'm just gonna sort of kind of just give him a ride over to Springfield so he can pick up his truck and finish his upgrade process. So, as promised, I got my briefcase here. And you know what that means? Yeah, it means either I'm going to court or we're going to talk business. And since I'm not dressed for court, we're going to talk business. So, this is a table of contents, but this is the independent contractor lease, prime lease. So, I had mentioned talking about this, and this was a good exercise for me because I did read the lease, but I kind of read it on my phone. So I got my wife to print out a hard copy for me. I got the whole thing here, and we're gonna go through it. And if you want to take notes, I'll indicate what paragraphs we're on, which sections we're on. So in the table of contents, the first thing is called a setup document, and it basically outlines the tractor, the tank size, and then what your payments are going to be. And I will tell you, I've said this before, my lease is a 100-week lease, but after the first 48 weeks, which should be around in less than a month, like around the first week of April, my payment is actually going down by $20 a month. So I've been paying $1,054 a week, but that's going down to $1,034 for the last 52 weeks of the lease. So that's that sheet. Next sheet is just a W-9 info sheet. And then we get to the first of really kind of important stuff. So this is United States Fire Insurance Company, and this is the insurance policy. And so it basically outlines the insurance coverages that Prime wants me to have, that they withhold from the truck settlement every week, and what the insurances are. And I don't know if a lot of people know what insurance coverage they have. They probably think it's just, collision or whatever. But there are a number of insurances in here, and I want to just mention them. So the amount of insurance, there's actually an accidental death and dismemberment, and it's my policy is, it's 200, 250, 300. So I think what I'd have to look at the paperwork on this, but usually they'll pay for dismemberment. Means like you lose something, not your wallet, but like a finger, a hand, an arm, some kind of limb. Could be an eye, could lose hearing in an ear, something like that. Anyway, and then typically if you're killed as a result of an accident at work, then there's like double indemnity, but it looks like it might be 50% indemnity, paying $300,000 for an accidental death. Then there's a disability income benefit. This is important insurance, and I also have disability outside of this policy. So temporary disability, there's a weekly benefit. It cannot exceeds 70% of the person's average weekly earnings. So they would probably go back and look at what the truck nets, but it's not going to be enough to live on. It's just going to be enough to, maybe put some food on the table. But you can get additional policies. Then there's a permanent total disability monthly benefit, which is 4.3 times the average weekly earnings, and then 70% of that, subject to a maximum amount of $3,000 a month. Not a lot. Accidental medical dental benefit, maximum benefit is $1 million. That's the policy limit. But here are some other, and the maximum payment period for a temporary total disability. So that means that you're totally disabled and you can't work, but it also means that they think it's going to be temporary. So for example, if you broke your pelvis and your legs, well, that's a total disability, right? Like you can't get in and out of the truck, you can't drive, you can't do your job, right? That's a total disability as to your work. But that would probably be deemed temporary because all those bones will eventually heal. You might need some surgeries, but they would pay up to 104 weeks. In other words, 2 full years, or up to the age of 70. So if you got disabled and you're 68 and a half, they're not going to pay 2 full years. They're going to pay a year and a half until you reach age 70. Okay, so then there are optional riders on this policy. There's non-occupational covered rider, meaning if you have your spouse in the truck, if you have your child in the truck. This does not include a TNT student. There's accidental death and dismemberment benefit of $5,000, accidental medical and dental benefit of $5,000. Not a lot. There's hernia coverage here. Maximum benefit $50,000. Hemorrhoid coverage, right? I don't hear of it very often, but I remember when I was a kid, my dad had hemorrhoid surgery, but it's covered for up to $50,000 per person. I don't know how big of a hemorrhoid you have to get 50 grand, but it's covered. Passenger accident coverage. Okay, so this would be in addition to the accidental death and dismemberment. And this is going to be a liability policy for you as a driver. So let's say that I'm driving my truck and I have my daughter in the truck. If I'm negligent, my wife, in her capacity as my daughter's, what they would call next friend, like that's kind of a term of art, but as her parent, could sue me, her husband, as the driver of the truck for negligence and collect. So that's my liability coverage there. Occupational disease coverage, maximum benefit $75,000. Let's say that I got a disease that was attributable to my work here on the truck. If it was 100% attributable, I would have up to $75,000 of coverage for that without regard to the disability coverage. So let's say I was permanently disabled, they'd pay the disability for 104 weeks. But if I had, say, cancer, and they're like, well, he has cancer because he always was around diesel fuel and, lubricants and refrigerant, and the only time he was around those in the past, 20 years was driving this truck. That's what that coverage would hopefully cover. I mean, and don't get me wrong, right? Insurance companies make money by not paying policy claims. That's their business model. They're not being assholes, or, well, they kind of are, but that's just their business model. Don't pay a claim if you can avoid it. That's how they make money. So you would probably have to get a lawyer and fight with them over most of these coverages. And then the last coverage that's an optional rider is the cumulative trauma coverage. Now, honestly, without looking at the policy documents, I don't know exactly what the definition of that is, but let's say that you got busted up into small change and, you know, in an accident or something, there is a benefit of $75,000 under cumulative coverage. Now, here's an important part of the policy. Written notice, so this is telling them that you have a claim or a potential claim. Written notice of the claim must be given to us, meaning the insurer, within 20 days after the occurrence or the commencement of any loss policy covered by this policy, or as soon thereafter as is reasonably possible. So here's an example. Let's say that, you know, you get T-boned by somebody and you're in the hospital, you're unconscious for a month, and you come out of your coma, and then you're like, oh, I got an insurance policy, let me let me file a claim. Well, obviously that's going to be past 20 days, but it's not unreasonable. So you know what, you know that there's going to be a claim. Now, let me just say this. In a situation like that, you would be filing notice of a claim without actually saying what the claim is in full. In other words, you would say, I was badly injured in a car wreck, I've been in a coma for a month, I will provide additional information, you know, on all my injuries, the severity, the duration of, you know, any disability, etc. But as soon as practicable, you want to at least put them on notice that there's going to be a claim. And then the address is in here, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is the other part, beneficiary information, right? Now, the first beneficiary here is my company, and then the second beneficiary, the contingent beneficiary, is my wife. You always want to make sure you have a beneficiary, right? You want to make sure it's up to date. If something changes in your life, you get divorced, somebody passes away that can no longer be your beneficiary, you want to make sure that you update that, you know, every once in a while. In the Navy, we called it verifying our page 2. You want to make sure that whoever your beneficiaries are able to get those benefits in the event that something bad happens. Okay? This is a certificate of insurance, of liability insurance, called a COI. Sometimes you see those. This is my APU lease. Okay, understanding what we haul, that's in here, and you actually have to sign it. Every single one of these categories. So the top one is refrigerated, then it's flatbed, then it's tanker. Okay, but on each of these lists, and I'm not going to go through it, you kind of know what everybody hauls, but at the end of every itemized list it says and more and more and more. In other words, this is not an exhaustive list. You can't be in refrigerated and you're, you know, they tell you to haul X and you're like, wait a minute, it's not on the list. It is on the list because the list says and more. So it's not an exhaustive list. Okay, enough messing around. Now we're into the lease agreement. I gotta say this is a pretty straightforward lease. There's not a lot of trickery or a lot of confusing terms in this. And I want to highlight some of them. So section 1, 2, it's just leases, lease charges. And section 3 is your option to purchase. And the key to that is making sure you look at the Schedule C. It basically tells you what the truck is worth at a given month in a lease. So this truck is under a 3-year lease. Excuse me. Under a 3-year lease. But they don't provide a value until the first 24 months. And then, you know, it tells you, okay, if you wanted to buy this truck, and by the way, the 24th month is next month in April. If I want to buy the truck, they tell me what it is that they would charge. Okay, so now paragraph 4, excess mileage charge. One of the lease charges is excess mileage. It is based on the accumulated average weekly miles the tractor travels in excess of the mileage shown in Schedule A. Okay? And so you always have to refer back to these schedules. Okay? In excess. So the excess mileage charge, here's Schedule A. Okay? If you're on a 3-year lease, it's 2,900 to 3,400 miles per week. And that is not really broken out here, but I know that it's based on either solo or team. And if you're above 2,900 as a solo, they assess an additional 5 cents a mile. If you're above 3,401 as a solo, 3 cents a mile. More than 4,100 in a week, it's going to be 1 cent a mile. So it's pretty easy to run over 4,100 miles in a week in as a team, okay? But keep that in mind for a second. But here's what it says. The excess mileage charge shall be adjusted and paid by you weekly based on the average miles the tractor travels. And here's the important part, and I kind of highlighted this. If you exercise your option to purchase, Success shall pay you an amount equal to the entire excess mileage charge paid by you. Okay? So anyway, this is just a business expense that, and by the way, if you're, this is the average. So for example, I went home on Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. I went home on Wednesday. I didn't drive my truck again until today. So my weekly, so for the week I'm in, it's probably pretty low how many miles I travel. And keep in mind, this is the average. So if you're doing stuff where you're just running a lot of short runs and then, you know, you're making a living doing that, you're probably never going to have to deal with excess mileage. Okay? It's just, and again, it's the average, the cumulative average. So you could tell when you so I have a 100-week lease. If I said, okay, I have a 100-week lease, that means I could put 290,000 miles on this truck. It could have let me rephrase it. It could have 290,000 miles at the end of the 3-year lease. Or if I was teaming, it could have 340,000 at the end of the 3-year lease without incurring any additional charges. But then, you know, if there are additional charges, then, you know, it comes out in the, it comes out as a business expense. Okay. And, you know, you think about it, it's like, yeah, you're paying 5 cents a mile extra, or you're paying 3 cents a mile extra, or you're paying 1 cent a mile extra. I mean, really, that's kind of negligible. If you're running those kinds of miles, especially as a team, you're going to be making, you know, so it's like saying, oh, I didn't make $2.50 on that load, I made $2.49. Well, if you're like, no, that penny matters to me because I'm running over 4,100 miles, then keep the penny and don't run it. Don't take the load. I mean, that's your option. Okay, tire fund, tire replacement reserve. Basically, what you need to know is this is just 2.5 cents per mile. Cents per mile, 2.5 cents per mile, just set aside. I've talked about the fact that I have tire fund that's residual on this lease, like it came with the lease. And then I also have my own tire fund. So I have never dipped into my own tire fund. I mean, I am going to replace the drives on this truck when I get out to Springfield because it's just time. But I don't even know, even doing all 4 of those, depending on how much tread I get, I may not replace, or I may not even dip into my own tire fund. But if I do, fine, it's there, right? It's something that I was going to have to do anyway. Okay. nature of agreement is paragraph 6. You know, it's just saying who the parties are. The use, right? What are you going to use the truck for? Well, it tells you. And again, this is a lot of boilerplate, a lot of standard stuff. Sublease. You can't sublease this without Success Leasing's permission. Nothing unusual there. Order of payment. This is number 9. You shall require the carrier to which you lease your tractor, which is prime, to distribute all amounts earned by you for your use of your tractor in the following order. Amounts owed to the carrier. That's anything that I owe back, okay? Anything that I owe to the carrier. Then the lease payment. Then the excess mileage charges, the tire replacement reserve, and the balance goes to me or to my company. In other words, the first money out is always going to be arrearages, stuff that's owed. Then it's going to be the payment. Then it's going to be the excess mileage. Then it's going to be the tire fund. In other words, they're taking care of the asset first, and that shouldn't surprise anybody. Okay, so changes, alterations, and improvements. If you're leasing, you really are not allowed to modify the truck in any way without permission. Now, if you put a CB antenna, are they going to say anything? Probably not. But they can require you to take it off, you know, when you turn the truck in. People that are just leasing, not purchasing, that are putting stickers on their trucks or whatever, that's actually prohibited by the lease. Not saying they're going to do anything about it, but if you gave them a reason to, they could certainly enforce it. And by the way, if they enforced it as to you, they don't have to enforce it as to anybody else. That's their right. That's a privilege that's in these documents called waiver. They can waive a term. Okay. Okay, number 11 is inspection. It basically says they can inspect the truck at any time in a place that's reasonable, convenient, which basically is like Springfield or any other place they direct you. Maintenance and repairs. No surprise here, it says if you use the truck under the lease, you gotta pay for maintenance and repairs, right? You can do it wherever you want. I guess you could even do it yourself if you really wanted to crawl under your truck and stuff. But they have the right to still inspect the work, okay? So if you're like, oh, I got my oil changed, I changed my oil. Well, they could make you come to a terminal and make sure that you put the right filters in, make sure the oil was the right type. So, you know, that's up to you, but just know that they still have the right to inspect. Okay, but here's an important, I thought this was an important provision. And this is on driveline repairs. So driveline, transmission and powertrain, right? And probably that's going to also cover rear differentials, stuff like that, driveline. Engine. So basically, yeah, I was just pulling that out of my butt sort of, but I'm right. Driveline components are the engine, transmission, differentials, and engine cooling system, okay? So radiator, fan, that stuff, coolant reservoir, that's all, and the other 3, engine, transmission, differentials, that's the driveline. It says, you shall only pay 50% of all the costs in excess of $500 to repair or replace any driveline components, and 100% of all costs less than $500 to repair or replace any driveline components. So what does that mean? Basically, $500 is your deductible. So you're on the hook for the $500, and then half of any other repairs. So let's say that, you know, there's a $3,000 repair that has to be made. Okay, so how's that going to be divided up? Well, the first $500 is yours, right? And then that leaves $2,500. You're on the hook for half of that. So you're on the hook for $1,250. Prime's on the hook for the other $1,250, or actually Success, right? So that means $3,000 repair, you're going to have to come up with $1,750, right? Not surprising, DPF filters have to be maintained. And by the way, it says nothing in this agreement obligates you to use any particular vendor or maintenance facility recommended by Success. All right, then they talk about warranty. License, permits, and taxes, you shall pay all those. Again, not surprising. If you lease a building, you're gonna, and you're the only lessee in the building, you're gonna pay all the property taxes. That's just how leases work. Cooperation, you agree to cooperate with Success, making sure people know what the status of your truck is. If something's broken, you gotta tell them, right? You don't have to get it fixed at a prime shop if you don't want to, but you gotta get it fixed, right? And they have the right to inspect. Okay, and then section 16, and it's capitalized, but it's an indemnity agreement, and there's a hold harmless clause in here, and you basically are indemnifying or saying you will pay for all their costs of Success Leasing for anything that you do, acts or omissions by you or your agents and employees, and against all claims against Success by you and your agents. So in other words, if you have a co-driver and they decide they're going to sue Success Leasing for some reason, Success is basically saying, well, as a condition to us leasing this truck to you, you agree to cover any claim against us, including attorney's fees. So again, this is not something unusual. It's not, it doesn't jump out at me as something scary, you know? Sorry, I opened my windows because it's pretty warm here today in South Central PA. Okay, lease completion incentive. If you complete the full term of this lease, Success agrees to pay you an amount equal to $5.25 per authorized dispatch mile while this lease is in effect. So it doesn't matter what you earned per mile, they're going to kick in an extra 5.25 cents per mile. So, you know, that could add up, right? That's the incentive to complete this. In other words, whatever sales said you were earning, whatever you thought you were earning, you're actually earning more as long as you're completing this lease. You're earning 5.25 cents more. Okay? I don't know what leases at other companies look like, but to me, this is not too shabby, right? It's just a nice little boost. Okay, so section 18 is termination of the lease. I'm not going to go into all this. There's termination for cause, and then there's just other contingencies and stuff. But here's what you need to know about termination. They're going to make sure that the truck is restored when you terminate a lease to whatever condition it was when you got it. Shouldn't be any surprise there. They're going to hold back any money they need to. However, if you don't bring the truck back, they're also going to charge you. They're also going to charge you for that stuff. Okay. And so it's important that you kind of understand that. But here's another provision that I really want to highlight. There's a personal property clause, number 19. Success Leasing will reimburse you for up to $3,000 for loss of personal items in the truck when such loss is not solely caused by the perils of collision, upset, overturn, or fire, and are not caused by acts or omissions. So what could happen is, let's say your truck was locked up and you're at a prime terminal and somebody breaks into your truck and steals your your GameCube or your PS5 or whatever you have, right? Your 60-inch TV. Success will reimburse you for that loss if you file a claim with them and provide all the information that they ask for. Okay, number 20. This isn't, I think this is important, and I think people might gloss over this. It says, it's section 20 is called set off. Apologize, there's a jockey backing up here. Okay, so if this lease is terminated for any reason before the expiration of the lease, you authorize Success to go to any follow-on company you drive for, and you authorize that company that you're driving for, whether as a company driver, lease operator, owner operator, you authorize them to offset against any amounts due to you by that carrier an amount sufficient to cure any deficiencies in this lease. In other words, let's say you're like, oh man, I got a smoking deal. My uncle's gonna give me a tractor. I'm gonna go to work for Landstar, and you're like in the hole, and you didn't return your truck, and there's all these charges. Prime, when they find out where you are, they can go to that carrier, and this clause allows them to ask that carrier to withhold money to make Prime whole from your settlements. And that carrier probably is going to honor that. And truthfully, Prime could sue you and seek injunctive relief to get that carrier to do that. So if you think you're going to walk away owing Prime a bunch of money and go to work at, Scruffy Trucking, and they're not going to come after you, or they're not going to be able to get to you anyway, this is a great term that's in this lease for Prime that allows them to collect from you without really getting a judgment against you. So just keep that in mind. So 21 is advances. This basically says they can advance money to you in their sole discretion for anything that they deem necessary, and that you're going to repay it to them. There's an assignment clause. You can't assign the lease, but Success could assign it. So Success could sell the rights to this lease to another leasing company. Okay. 23 is notices. In other words, if you need to notice Success about something, there's a mailing address here. You can't just go upstairs at Springfield and hand it to somebody in leasing and say, oh, I noticed Success. Whatever it is, right? Whether it's a claim for personal property, an injury, whatever it is, or even if you're just like, hey, I'm going to turn the truck in, at the end of the lease, or I want to buy the truck. There's an address you got to send it to, okay? And then it also it will have your address of your company's. Governing law and arbitration. This contract is governed under the laws of the state of Missouri, and you're basically agreeing to arbitration. I don't want to get into a whole civil procedure class here on how you could get around that. I don't like arbitration clauses. I just don't care for arbitration clauses, but they're in a lot of agreements. And again, I don't want to get into a whole civil procedure class. I mean, you would want to consult with an attorney if you're like, hey, I'm going to have to sue Success over this lease. Okay. All right. So this is Schedule A. We talked about that a little bit. Just outlines of payments and stuff like that. Schedule B, minimum conditions and guidelines. This is basically what the material condition of the truck has to be. I would say at all times, but especially when you turn it in. So if you turn in a truck that's like the belts are showing through the tires and there's like 1 micron left of brake pad or brake lining, don't be surprised when they're like, yeah, we had to put new rubber all the way around and we had to do a brake job and we had to do this. If you wail on the truck, if you don't treat it well, it's going to cost you in the end, right? And if you don't keep up on maintenance, it's still going to cost you in the end, maybe more. So that's Schedule B. Okay, this is an addendum to the lease that says they can provide financial benefits, and that would create contingent obligations. So if there's something that they haven't thought of, but let's say they, like, your truck gets crushed by a meteor, okay? They can put you up at a hotel, but if they do that, they may seek to recoup that if it's not covered by insurance or some other way. So they can, you know, when they give you a new truck, they would do it. Here's Schedule C, the tractor purchase option price. And just to give you an idea, at month 25, they're saying that this truck, a 2020 Freightliner, will still hold 68.74% of its original cost. The beginning value was $151,000. So if I bought this truck at month 25, if I went to Success and said, hey, I want to buy this. And by the way, this is the way, if you're leasing and you can't get into a purchase, you can still purchase the truck you have. It's just a different kind of transaction, and I don't know what the financing would look like. But just to give you an idea, month 25, this 2020 Freightliner, they're saying the payoff amount is $103,800. Now, that may well be the correct payoff amount, but it's their payoff, right? It doesn't, you know, so you have to ask, okay, is that a good deal for me, right? Because, you know, presumably they're paying some interest, but they're wanting you to pay the whole thing off, which may not be fair market value, okay? Early termination mileage schedule is Schedule D. Okay, then there's a personal, it says personnel, but it should say personal, service agreement. So this basically is that, hey, we will, since you're leasing with us, we will, you know, hire you to haul our cargo, and, you know, we'll pay you, etc. So that's what this agreement is about. Again, I'm not going to get too much into it, but, you know, again, a lot of the provisions are the same. You have to make sure that if you're leasing, you provide a driver for the truck. You know, they have to be qualified. Compensation of drivers, so if there's a second driver, you know, it goes into all of that, okay? And then there's, you know, indemnification clauses, arbitration clauses, all that stuff. Then here's a schedule. Here's a schedule to the personnel support agreement. Basically says that if they're, when I have a TNT student on the truck and I'm running, you know, I'm paying them and paying their taxes, for Prime to do the work associated with that, I pay Prime $10 a week to handle my payroll, basically. Okay, the next agreement, which is 16 pages, is an independent contractor agreement. Basically what this is saying, and there's a, you know, like I said, it's this lengthy agreement, but it basically says I'm not their employee, and, you know, they're not my employer. So, you know, and it also outlines how much revenue I'll get, etc. Okay. So that's that. And one of the things on this independent contractor agreement that's, I think everybody should be familiar with, is this is Schedule C, or I'm sorry, Schedule 3 of the independent contractor agreement. So it tells what you're going to pay for various items. Okay, so licenses and permits, $40 a week. Performance bond, $30 a week for the first 50 weeks. And by the way, that money that's also refundable. You're going to pay for operating statements, $15 a week. And that is my settlement statement that I get every week. It's, you know, that's stuff I can provide straight to the accountant. Accounting services. So that's for Prime to do all the stuff that they do to prepare those statements. Admin or citations. So if you get a speeding ticket and you go to citations with it, they're going to charge you $10 for trying to help with that. I don't think that's a lot of money, but you know, it is a cost, and they're just trying to recoup part of their cost. Your fuel card. So I have a fuel card with Prime. It works every time I try to use it. They charge me $1 a week for having that fuel card. If I get an express code to pay lumpers, I get charged $2.55 per occurrence. So I don't even think I get one express code per week. There's a lot of places that don't use lumpers that you might be surprised. In fact, a lot of times I'll be like, oh dang, this place has lumpers, and then they don't, or they do, but I don't have to pay them. Sometimes the shippers pay them. I know everybody likes to hate on lumpers, but you know, it's a little bit of brain damage. It's not a lot to me. And this is a guy coming from the dry van side of the world, where lumpers were even more rare than they are for me. I mean, you know, a lot of places, they just don't use lumpers, either because they have unions, like up in the Northeast. A lot of places don't use lumpers. A lot of companies just don't use lumpers. You know, if you got a FedEx load, if you got a high val load, no lumpers are going to be touching that stuff. UPS loads, no lumpers. You know, there's a lot of stuff we handle that you don't have to deal with lumpers. So, but if you do, $2.55 to get an express code. Occupational accident. I talked about all the insurances, $28.56 a week. It's a business expense, and it's worth it. Federal highway use tax, $10.58 per week. Then there's the fuel and road use tax. That is 2 cents per mile. That's the actual cost, and it's reconciled monthly. And by the way, there are some footnotes here. And then scanning, if you know, like if you're using your app to scan your bills and stuff, $5 a week. So basically you're paying for the app, you're paying for the ability to scan that stuff. So those are some of your charges. Actually, those are most of your fixed stuff. There's an addendum to the independent contractor operating agreement. It's basically the retention and rewards program. So if you are driving with Prime and you're leasing, Prime puts away $1,000 a year, and Success kicks in another $500 a year into a fund that once you've been here for 10 years, and then it vests. If you're an owner, Success doesn't kick in their $500, it's just $1,000 per year. But again, it vests after 10 years. And the way it works is that you get to pick from 3 options for how that money is invested. The first one is a large cap S&P 500 index fund. The second is an asset allocation, which basically takes into account your age and adjusts the amount of holdings in equity and bonds and cash based on your projected retirement age. And then the third option is just a prime interest rate plus 1% with an 8% cap. And basically what that would mean is that, you know, if they put in $1,500 a year for 10 years, you would definitely have a little bit more than $15,000, but not a lot more. You know, but you'd never lose money. So those things are basically in order of risk: the S&P 500 fund, the asset allocation, and just getting interest on it. And then you get to designate a beneficiary, but here's how the benefits are distributed. You can get it in a lump sum. You can get it in annual installments for a maximum of 3 years. And the benefit is payable once you're 100% vested, so after 10 years, in the event of death. And that's why you want to have your beneficiary information up to date. So in the event of death, disability, or you hit age 65. So if you're fully vested, but you're only, and 59.5 is the magic number for qualified investment plans like 401k and IRAs. So you could start withdrawing at 59.5 without penalty. This, you got to wait till you're 65 before they will distribute the money. And there's there's like some FAQs here that tell what you get. And there's actually a program calculation example, like if you leased for a few years and then you went, you know, owner op, you know, like you purchased, because then that would be, I guess, outside of success lease. So then this is the adoption agreement, where I picked how I wanted to invest my money, as well as my beneficiary. Let's see here. I think that's about, yeah, that's it. So, I know I covered this kind of quickly, but there's not a lot to this lease that's really like mind-boggling or like draconian. I think there's a lot of boilerplate. It's pretty standard, but you should read it over. And if you got questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. But you should read documents before you sign them. And I think I mentioned more than once that when I was in an ACE 2 class, you know, there were people that were like, oh, well, how come they do that? And, you know, like both the instructor and I kind of simultaneously said, well, it's in the lease. So it is important to read this and understand it, and, you know what you're entitled to, right? It's your business. You need to take care of your business. So, but like I said, if you got any questions, let me know. I'll try to answer them. And by the way, you should be able to call Success Leasing and get clear explanations of these terms. Now, maybe not everybody in there is going to be able to do it for you, but you know, Peter Lynch, who's the guy that was one of the founders of Fidelity, he said about investments that, you know, you should be able to explain an investment to a second grader and have them see why it's a good idea. Well, they should be able to explain these terms to you so a second grader would understand. Not saying you're only have the intelligence of a second grader, but they need to, you know, like get rid of the legalese and you know, just make sure that you're clear on it. I will say though that there's not a lot of that in there. This is not a super hard lease to understand. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you watched this long, thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, comment, ask me questions. I'm happy to talk about it. I, however, am not going to debate whether this is a good lease or a bad lease, because really you're not going to know, right, until you get out there and drive, until you see what you're really making. And you know, it's a walk-away lease, so there's not tons of risk. And you know, I think that's good. I also think it's bad sometimes, though. I think a lot of people are, you know, they try it and maybe they don't have the success they want right off the bat, and so they're just like, they throw in the towel because they don't really want to do everything they need to do to be successful. But this is not a hard lease to find success in. And I hate to keep using the success word because that, you know, they call themselves success leasing. I'm not, you know, getting anything for persuading anybody to come to Prime, but anyway, thanks for watching. We got some other good stuff coming up here shortly, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.